Welcome, friends, to this episode of the Sync Your Life podcast. Today, I have my friend Stacy Miller with us. She's going to talk to us about her story, her journey with alcohol, and how she is now sober and sober for the health of it. We're going to talk about the ins and outs of what it means to really give up alcohol, especially as women. We're going to talk about how alcohol impacts hormone health and so much more. So I can't wait to have this interview. I've been looking forward to this for some time. So Stacy, what I'll do is I'll just let you have the microphone, and you can kind of share with everyone what's your story, what's your background, who are you, and give them a chance to know you.
Awesome. I'm so excited to be here, Jenny. Thanks for having me. And this is such an important topic and has grown more passionate, in my life, and just full discussion about alcohol and the real effects of it. Starting back, 10 years ago, I would never have said, I would be talking about sober for the health of it, because I would have said that I will never not drink. I said that to people. I remember saying, oh, I will never not drink. That's who I am. I'm the life of the party. What will I be without it? And I think that is, really important, because a lot of women can relate to that. So now I have two small children, a 3 and a 4-year-old. And I realize even more now how lucky I am to have replaced that alcohol in my life with other aspects. So I didn't come from the health and wellness background. I actually came from running one of our family's roller skating rinks. So I've always been around active stuff, but my passion grew around health and wellness once I had children and realized that I was exhausted and, just all the things that we realize as a new mom. And we think, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be. And absolutely it wasn't. So I really started diving in to, food as fuel, and the importance of sleep, and the importance of working out and moving our bodies. But really with that emphasis on replacing alcohol in your life for the health of it, because I realized that once I got into the industry, I realized that is what was holding women back a lot of times. And when that light kind of clicked, in their brain, they were like, oh yeah. And then you start recognizing more and more, especially after COVID hit, just how much alcohol was made a joke, and how much it was made as a self-care, or how much it was made as a way to cope, when really it was making everything, including our hormones and our mindset, worse. It wasn't doing anything to help any of that. So my passion to just get loud about replacing alcohol, I just couldn't. When in 2020, I had to. I've been married before, and it was an addictive marriage. My first husband lost his life to addiction, so I have a lot of passion around how it can creep in. Nothing mind-blowing happened. I wasn't put in jail. I wasn't missing my mortgage payments. I wasn't, not making our car payments. I wasn't showing up late to work. I was actually doing all of those things beautifully, and it wasn't that. It was just something clicked where I said, there has to be more than wine at night. There has to be more than this life. And when you really use those resources that there are out there for replacing alcohol, and really diving into having that support system that you need, it can really be such a beautiful life without it. It's really cool.
Yeah. I think this episode is going to touch a lot of people, a lot of women, because I know for me, I've been leading this digital course for the past couple of years, teaching women about hormone health. And the topic of alcohol has really surfaced to the conversation in that associated Facebook group quite a bit. Women wanting to know what the healthier alcohol alternatives are, right? And wanting to know how much is this affecting me, or all that kind of stuff. And we're going to talk about that today. But I do want to touch briefly on something you just said about the pandemic, because I remember when COVID had first started in 2020, I remember seeing a statistic, and of course, I don't remember what the specific number was now, but it was a statistic that said that, how high alcohol sales were climbing. I know a lot of restaurants and places local to me were even doing like carry out alcohol. All of a sudden now you could carry out alcohol. And it's like, if nothing else, I just remember thinking, what an oxymoron, really, that we are living in this pandemic that is so indicative of our cultural health, right? Like we are in such an obesity epidemic as a country. We are in such a problem when it comes to metabolic health. And yet alcohol becomes more readily available and the sales soar, and it's like really what we should have been seeing is exercising increasing and healthy foods increasing, right? But it was the exact opposite. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly. But what I do want to ask though is, I love what you said about like, there was no earth shattering thing that was necessarily happening to you. And I think a lot of women listening to this are in that same position, right? They're not necessarily in the movies.
Right.
Their life isn't a movie trailer of like subsequent bad things that are happening necessarily, but there is sort of this idea of alcohol becoming a crutch, right? As becoming sort of your release or your stress relief. I want you to touch on that for us.
Yeah, so it just creeps in as, that routine of the nightly glass to kind of relax and things. And this is because as a culture, this is what we're seeing. I recently posted on my social media about a new alcohol that came out called Mom Water. This is a vodka infused sparkling water, and it's called Mom Water. And we are being unintentionally fed these types of things, and it's an addictive substance. So just like sugar, you just reach for it because that's what you're used to. If you're not being intentional about really setting your intentions to do other things during that happy hour or during that time, and the displays in the grocery store and all that don't make it any easier. We've all fallen victim to the Super Bowl display of the Tostitos that we didn't really want. It's the same thing with alcohol. And we've started to lose that connection between women, that real connection between people, especially sober connection when you actually you have fun without alcohol, and you have women that meet and drink water. That's very, you don't really say, hey, let's go have a glass of wine instead, so it's just becomes that routine. And we have to know that there are other ways. There's replacements out there with mocktails. There's replacements with fun classes you can take for working out or movement, or replacing that time of day. It's really reframing your thinking around why you are using alcohol and how it makes you feel the next day. And I think a lot of us don't want to dive deep into that thought. It's a little bit scary because then you feel everything too when you're not drinking. And we want that sort of release during the day to just think, oh, I just not think about this anymore. But then in turn, this is where it affects the sleep and the mindset and everything. So it kind of does that double whammy.
Right. Yeah. And it makes me think too, there's like the meme that floats around social media that talks about like, if it's too early for wine, like it's something about like coffee and wine, right? Like the rotation of coffee all morning, and then how early is too early for wine, right? And it's almost this I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but this bravado that women are after, right? Like that we are just these exhausted moms and we need our coffee and we need our wine, and we need this, like I said, constant rotation of the two. And it's interesting because as a health and wellness coach myself, right? Like one of the programs that I endorse is a 3-week sort of cleanse. And I can remember when I share this cleanse on my own social media, and when I do it frequently myself, the resounding response that I get when it comes to excuses is, well, I could never give up my wine for 3 weeks,
Yes.
or I could never give up my alcohol for 3 weeks. And it's like, I just want to pause here to say that if that's you, right? Like if the idea of going without something for 3 weeks is life altering, like you can't adjust your nutrition because of it, for example, perhaps it's time to start looking at a healthier alternative. And we're going to talk about those alternatives here in a little while. I want to talk about this concept that you have of sober for the health of it. I want you to kind of dive deeper into that for us.
Okay, so I love to dive deeper into this sober for the health of it, because I think if as women, as we age, especially when we have children and we feel exhausted, we want to think about things that are going to give us energy, make us feel alive. So if we think about our gut health, our metabolism, our muscle recovery, our if that alcohol is blocking nutrients that we need, lowering our immune system, if we can think about it in a way of, oh, I you can't outwork a bad diet, right? It's the same thing with alcohol. If you can reframe your thinking to say, okay, every time I drink, my gut health is affected, which is affecting my brain. And I love, there's a guy I follow, Doc Amen. I'm sure some of you guys know, and he always talks about how your brain shrinks every time you drink. So I like to think about the aspects instead of just saying, oh, I'm hungover, I feel terrible, of thinking, how is this affecting my health? And, I know that all of you listening are health conscious. I tell this to my clients. I have 6-week health and wellness that I promote as well. And it's the same kind of thing, Jenny, that you said, like if you can't remove alcohol, replace alcohol for 6 weeks, we need to have a different conversation. I always like to say, if it's not a problem, it's not a problem to remove it or replace it with something else. So if you're thinking you really are looking at nutrition and you're looking at long-term optimal health, let's think about, the gut health and the mindset. And a lot of women, when I say, oh yeah, your metabolism is prioritizing that alcohol, you know what I mean? Like it's working overtime to try to get that out of your system. So you are not burning fat. So when I say that, they're like, oh, some women are like, hold on, I didn't realize, but I'm drinking Truly or Skinny, whatever, this, that, and the other. And it still is putting that toxin in your body that is hindering, that optimal health, that optimal hormone release, that optimal sleep that we all need for these muscle recoveries. So I just like to say, if you can think of sober for the health of it as the reason for replacing alcohol instead of no labeling. I don't need labels. I don't participate in AA particularly. And I want to make that very clear. There's different ways that you can replace alcohol. It can be for the health of it. It can be because it doesn't make you feel great, So if I love to say the sober for the health of it as a way to tell women that they can tell their friends, like, because, everyone wants to know, well, what do I say when I quit drinking? And I say, you say you're not drinking for the health of it because, you want to get up and get that workout and you want to lift heavy. You want to not have your balance kind of, altered when you're doing those workouts. So, you want that immune system high, especially with this, that, and the other popping up. So, those are the types of things. I mean, everywhere from your mouth hygiene to, lifting heavy, it goes from front to back with that. So I think if you can reframe it to the health of it, it makes it easier to kind of say, oh yeah, I'm doing this because, I want to feel great, really.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. I had a couple of thoughts as you were talking. Number one is my podcast listeners know that I measure everything in energy. And so it's always interesting to me that women will come into the course and, usually, I hate to say this, but a lot of times women are motivated in the beginning because they want to hit a certain number on the scale, or they want to get back to their high school jeans or whatever the case is, right? Like these really weird goals. And I always have to sort of help them reframe it. Okay. So if that's the way you're feeling, let's instead shift the conversation to your energy. Do you wake up in the morning with energy? Are you feeling like you're crashing mid-afternoon? Are you grabbing that wine at night, right? What are those things that indicate your overall energy? And then when we can reframe our health goals in terms of our energy, this sober for the health of it makes so much sense, because then it's like, well, anything that's not serving me, I'm going to eliminate, right? Like that's what wellness is. It's giving your body what serves it and taking away what doesn't. So I have a neighbor, a former neighbor of ours that I don't know I guess, and this happens, I think everybody knows somebody, there's people in everyone's life who are sort of the alcohol bullies. And we used to have a neighbor who would have these, just their immediate family would have like fire pits on the Friday nights or whatever. And they would wander over into our yard and be like, here. And they were like, literally, like it was almost like it was their life's mission to get us to drink the beer or get us to whatever. And I remember there being a couple of times where I was in the middle of like a test group for an at-home fitness program. And I'm like fully committed to the test group, which means no alcohol, no nothing, right? Like just paying attention to the program. And I remember telling the neighbor, like, no, like, look, I'm committed to this program and I'm doing this. I do this as a living. Like, this is my health and wellness business. And no, this was like probably the 7th or 8th time that we had said no. And finally, it was just this awkward moment of them. Like, it's almost like the insecurity in themselves comes out because you are saying, no, I'm taking a stand for my health and I'm not willing to do it. Listen, you do you, boo. Like if you
Yep.
want to go over there and have it, like that's on you, but I'm choosing not to. And it's okay for me to say that. So it's interesting to me because this idea of sober for the health of it really is what you can say to people in that situation. It's, and I like it because it's not like too harsh. It's not like, well, I'm trying to be healthy, right? Like you're not
Right.
trying to like put it in their face,
And
but
you're
it
not,
is
right.
right. You're not. It's just a matter of saying like, I just choose to be sober for the health. It almost puts this like sarcastic spin on an answer.
Yep.
That's true. That's both true, but it's also not offensive. I love that. So I'm definitely going to start using that in my life. But what is it with society, right? And this idea that like, it's weird for you to not drink. I
So,
mean, yeah.
yeah, I like to say if you're not doing it, then they're thinking, well, if she's, because it's always associated with having a problem because you're not doing it, but it's not. It's just when you start dialing into serving you or the energy, because I even talk to my clients, I say, and because I love the non-scale victories, everything is non-scale. Like, how do you feel? How was your sleep? This, that, and the other. So they can pinpoint, oh, if you're eating too much sugar one night, you tossed and turned. If you drank too much alcohol, you tossed and turned. So let's change that. But people like to, I always say this, that it's not, because if you're not doing something, then they think, well, should I not be doing something? And it's not. It's like, if you want to do that, you do that, but I'm on a different mission, So I just think, and then people feel like, oh, well, she feels, I feel bad if I don't. I've had clients say that are really truly evaluating their relationship with alcohol and say, I just drank out of habit, just ordering something. That's when the intentionality comes through and thinking, oh, I've got a workout I want to do in the morning. I've got errands. I've got kids. I need to go to bed by 9. Like, all the things.
Yeah.
It can spiral so quick.
Yeah. I think a lot of my listeners are probably moms, and I always like to reframe things in the perspective of like, what would you tell your children? Right. Like, so in other words, if your child was crashing, having tantrums, feeling tired, not sleeping well through the night, if that type of stuff was happening, which could potentially be happening to us as women, if that was happening, but yet you were giving them gummy worms and sugar, or, of course not alcohol, but if you were giving them things like that weren't serving them, wouldn't you say, okay, something needs to change, right?
Yes.
But yet here we are as women, and I see this every day where women are willing even to put the exercise in, right? Like, I mean, they're willing to do the movement. They get sort of like an endorphin high from the sweat, right? They do that. They commit to their exercise. A lot of times they'll even commit to their nutrition too, right? It's like 80% of the time they're eating clean, they're eating healthy, they're eating whole foods. And then they still come to me and they're like, oh, but I still can't sleep, and I still can't this, and I still have low energy. But yet it's like almost always the last thing to fall is the alcohol, right? Like women are more willing to give up the coffee. They're more willing to take the time to exercise. They're more willing to spend more time meal prepping. Like all those things happen first usually before someone embraces the alcohol. Now, I will speak from my own experience, and I know that I've shared this with you, but I want to share it to the listeners too. I'm 38 going on 39. I've had sort of the typical hormone decline a little earlier than most. So in my 20s, I started to see progesterone fall, and now it's like off a cliff, right? Like it's like diving off of a cliff. So thank goodness for supplementation and everything.
Right.
And thank goodness for self-awareness of me knowing my own body. But in the last 2 to 3 years, I've started to notice this this happened for me. And I have a really, really dear friend of mine who is exactly 10 years older than me. And we always joke that we're like hormone sisters. Like we experience the same things. Like we are both low in progesterone, right? Like, and it's great to have someone like that you feel like you are biologically maybe not connected to, but you feel like you are.
Right.
So she and I will talk a lot of times. And the one recurring thing that we were talking about 2 or 3 years ago was anytime we would have a glass of wine in particular at night, how bad we would sleep. Right. And it wasn't until this year, I invested in the Aura ring, and I've been wearing it every single night. And I've noticed, I mean, I think I've had 2 glasses of wine since January, like in 8 months. And both times that I've had it, I have literally not been able to sleep. It's like, it's really weird. And I don't know, again, I would say maybe it's only me, but I know it's not, because my friend is also experiencing this. But I will have, like, even if I have it early in the evening, it's like, I wake up at like 1 or 2 in the morning, I'm wide awake. I feel like I'm starving. I feel lightheaded and dizzy. And that's sometimes after 1 glass. Right. And so, I've noticed that like other forms of alcohol don't affect me quite the same as hard alcohol or wine. However, I have limited it so much. I mean, to
Yep.
probably be a handful of beverages this entire year. But at the same time, I feel like there's something to be said for that. So I know based on my hormone knowledge, right, that blood sugar is being affected, that my adrenal recovery is being affected. And so I want to dive into that a little bit, but I want to just ask you, what are the connections that you make between alcohol and sleep, especially for women?
Oh, 100%. You are not alone. You and your hormone soul sister are not alone. This is one of the most common things that people say. And honestly, I have a lot of other wellness coach friends that have replaced alcohol in their life for the exact same reason. They're like, yeah, no, I'm like done for 2 days, even if it's like 1 or 2 glasses at a wedding or something like that. I also have the Aura Ring, which I love. And obviously I'm not drinking any alcohol, but like if I have sugar or something on vacation, the next day it'll say like, hey, did you drink alcohol or have a lot of sugar? It affects your body. It's that same like wake up, put down. So, what a lot of women don't realize is that there is hormone release that is being disrupted when you're not getting that solid night's sleep. So if you're waking up at 1 or 2, which most women do when they're drinking, that hormone is not being released properly. Your REM sleep, you need that sleep to recover, our muscle recovery, everything, which is why we say rest days. And that alcohol blocks that sleep from happening. It blocks that release, or you're getting up to use the bathroom. I mean, there's multiple different things that happen with that sleep at night. And I've had a lot of people say, yeah, it's just not worth it. Those kind of sleepless nights, your muscle recovery, your dehydration, all of that plays into it. But I do agree that it's the last thing that people are willing to give up. The absorption of alcohol in your body, it just takes over kind of any sort of good that you did that day. I don't want to, it's like, oh yeah, you ate clean, you got your workout in, but then you drank a bottle of wine at night. So it's kind of one of those things. And I don't like to say all or nothing, because I do think it takes a gradual time, but sleep and alcohol are played in so much. And I love it when clients say to me, oh no, I'm never hungover, and then maybe they've gone 10 days without alcohol. And they're like, oh, I was hungover every day, because it's just that lingering lack of clarity. And that lack of clarity comes from lack of sleep, from dehydration, from your brain being affected, and all of that. So it just puts that into perspective. 30 days, people really see a huge change in their skin, their mental clarity. I mean, I've had women that have said, oh my gosh, Stacy, I thought I was sleeping amazing. You think you're sleeping amazing because you don't know anything else. It's like the energy factor before you start eating whole foods and eating enough protein and stuff like that. You think that's just the way you're supposed to feel. And then when you get those energy boosts from eating those clean foods and giving your body that hydration that you need, it's just one of those amazing things that kind of the light bulb comes on. So the sleep, when you replace alcohol with hydration and other things and you're not drinking, oh my gosh, it's like a light bulb, and you can it takes a while too. There's a lot of women that have been drinking for a long time that, it can take 6 months to a year for all of your hormones to come back regulated from that alcohol, because it's just been blocked for so long. My sister was actually one of those that noticed, some influx in weight once she stopped drinking. And then she, you started seeing muscle definition after, because it took a while for that regulation to come back into place.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to nerd out on my soapbox when it comes to this topic, because I just think women don't understand what exactly is happening in the body, right? When you're consuming alcohol, especially in the evening. It's funny because, like I just said, I can prove this with my Aura Ring scores. So, all the things that I thought I was experiencing that my friend and I were talking about 3 to 5 years ago, like, hey, do you feel this way after this? And both of us saying, yeah, I kind of do. I don't think I can do wine anymore. Right. All those things became proven with the Aura Ring, because it started to show me that, ironically, and this is what I wanted to touch on, was something you said, women feel like they're getting sleep. They feel like they're sleeping. Here's what's happening is especially if you're going off of 1 or 2 glasses of wine and you're going to bed, your body stays, at least from my own experience, stays in a lighter layer of sleep. So instead of getting you into a deeper layer of sleep, you're kind of coasting in the light sleep phase, which is not restorative. It is relaxing, which is probably what you're feeling, but it is not restorative. We need deep sleep. We need REM. We need 20% of our night to be dedicated to both. So I want to talk about that, but I also want to say this, and that is I have a podcast episode that I can link in the show notes. It's a solo round where I talked about blood sugar regulation. Blood sugar regulation is one of the top 2 ultimate root causes of hormone imbalance. So on my podcast, we talk about what's called the 4-legged hormone chair. We talk about the 4 legs of your endocrine system. When one leg is off kilter, of course, it sets the whole chair wobbly. So blood sugar tends to be the weakest leg of the chair for a lot of women. And what that means is perhaps women are not consuming enough protein or enough healthy fats, or they're under eating. They're not eating enough throughout the day. Or it could be things like this, where they're eating processed foods or drinking alcohol, and it's causing these drastic fluctuations to happen in their blood sugar. I believe in the next 5 to 10 years, everyone's going to be wearing a CGM. Like everyone's going to be wearing a constant glucose monitor that shows them what their bodies are doing and how it's responding to different foods and drinks. And when that happens, I feel like there's another layer of awareness that happens for people, right? It's like all of a sudden they make that connection to what they're consuming and how it affects them. But with alcohol, at least from my own experience, I know, like I said, I can prove it with my own experience. What happens is your blood sugar is surging, especially after a glass of wine. Wine in particular, right, is very high sugar. A lot of alcoholic drinks, or cocktails, all those kinds of things are usually very high sugar because they have some sort of mixer in them. And so when you're consuming the sugar, the high sugar dose, and then you're going to sleep or trying to go to sleep, what happens is your body is on a sugar high when you fall asleep. And then at some point throughout the night, that blood sugar tanks. It prevents it, and exactly what you were saying before. Your body is then working harder to recover itself, which is what it already does, by the way. Even if you have no alcohol, it's already trying to recover from your day, from your exercise, from your stressors. It's already trying to do that. And then alcohol puts this extra stress on the body. So not only are we experiencing extra stress in our sleep, but we're also putting this blood sugar fluctuation into the mix. When our blood sugar drops in the nighttime, that causes us to wake up, right? It was causing me to wake up feeling hungry, feeling anxious, feeling like I couldn't fall back asleep. And so all of these things are at play. Number 1, you're not getting enough deep restorative sleep because of the alcohol. Number 2, the blood sugar is fluctuating in all the wrong ways. And number 3, your adrenals and your muscles are unable to recover because your body is working overtime to metabolize that alcohol, even with just 1 glass. So I just want to say, like, even with just 1 glass. So I want you to tell us, you've kind of teased us a little bit with like alcohol replacements. Tell us, what do you use for alcohol replacements? What do you suggest with your clients?
Okay, so I, when I started kind of focusing on this, I didn't really dive into mocktails, although I do love a mocktail for my clients. I use all sugar-free mocktails. I don't, focus on any like of those kind of, it's all mine are like homemade. So I like to use sparkling waters with apple cider vinegar, which is another good blood sugar regulator. Using it with a straw so it doesn't mess up your teeth. Things like that are great. Any of the, like a kombucha, if you can do that, that's fabulous. My all-time favorite though is electrolytes. You can make I like to use the Relight, the Redmond's Relight. There's all different kinds of flavors. And, I always love that because it helps with muscle recovery. But the good thing about that is that, so I love like the pina colada flavor. Just for instance, you put it in water and you can put a little bit more in a smaller cup and add a little bit of, garnish to it. I think that is fabulous. But also too, intentional fuel helps with cravings. You talked about under eating and stuff. So when you are eating enough protein or, eating enough food in general throughout the day, your cravings are automatically eliminated in the evening time. And I see this a lot with my clients, and I'm sure you do too, with the lack of protein, especially for women which over 35, 40, that perimenopausal is kicking in. You're feeling, like you said, a little crazy already. We're already feeling a little nuts. Add in the kids, add in this, add in all the things. And we automatically put food to the back burner. Food is the most important thing. And I've had more than one client say to me, oh, I just had a long day. I didn't eat. So I just grabbed some wine and some chips. Then she's like, and I felt terrible the next day. Exactly. You're pulling whatever you can to give you that instant gratification. So I love to say, plan in a mocktail, have some good electrolytes, have, some kombucha that you can add with a little bit of sparkling water, have a clean sparkling water. I also love to take a garnish tray with me, and people have really thought this is fun, like a garnish charcuterie board. Instead of bringing, mixers or whatever, you can take a bunch of cut up limes, oranges, lemons, mint. And I actually have a really cool mocktail guide that you can put in the notes that people can download for free, and it's all like sugar free, none of the syrups or anything like that. It's really cool. That helps people. I've also had clients that have done alcohol free women groups, and they do the mocktail night, and they end up like telling me, oh my gosh, Stacy, we laughed until we cried because we had real conversation. But I always say, if 5 to 6 o'clock is a problem for you, or whatever it is after the kids go to bed, plan in some meditation, plan in some stretching. YouTube has tons of guided meditations right now for free. Think about doing something with your hands. I always have a puzzle in our dining room that I can go in. I mean, I hate to say this, laundry, anything that you can do with your hands. I also say, use the wine glass, but pour something fun in it. A lot of times it's just the idea of holding that we need to reframe. Like, oh, okay, I'm just sipping and making dinner, but I'm sipping a bubbly instead of, the mom water that I talked about earlier or whatever. So I love the reframe. I love the feeling better. I love making a better choice. And, not that I'm going to promote candy, but sometimes I say, listen, a Twizzler is better than a cocktail in the end, like when you're first trying to replace it. But I do promote super clean, healthy snacks. I love having, some RX almond butter with a date that can really give you that good sensation. So making those good, healthy, clean swaps to kind of curb that craving is what we need. And planning ahead, knowing the craving is coming, or knowing that in your brain you've always been doing that, so you need to do something different.
Yeah, almost like it's a habitual thing. Yeah,
Yep.
so it's interesting because I love all these tips, and I'm writing them down because I want to make sure I include them in the show notes too. But I think that, like for me, I've noticed that when I'm tracking my food intake, and when I'm focusing on, of course, I exercise 5 to 6 days a week, but when nutrition is a problem for me, dialing in the nutrition and making sure that I'm eating enough, and eating enough protein in particular, can help me so that by the time I hit the evening, honestly, sometimes it's really a mind game, because you're like, well, like I told my husband the other night, he offered a drink, a cocktail. And I said, here's the thing. I've exercised. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, I exercised today. I'm on track with my macros. I'm on track with my eating today. I feel satiated. And I was like, no, it's just not worth it. Like, it becomes this thing in your head where you're like, well, now I'm so like invested in my health, and I'm so invested in eating enough and all that kind of stuff, that I don't crave it, and I don't need it. A body that operates on carbs and sugar is a body that's going to crave carbs and sugar. So if you're eating a lot of that throughout the day, and I don't think carbs are bad, right? As long as we're eating healthy carbs, if you're eating a lot of that throughout the day, of course, you're going to be craving that alcohol in the evening. So one thing that I started doing this year, and I will link it in the show notes, I have an episode on protein intake for women. This was huge for me, because even as an exercising female, as someone who eliminates inflammatory foods from her diet and has been for years, I started to notice that I was waking up feeling hungry, or I was going to bed at night feeling like off, like feeling extra tired. And it literally took me a really long time to figure out that I needed more protein in my diet. And so I decided to make this shift. And so I decided to focus on consuming the right amount of protein, which I always like to tell women is, per pound of body weight should be a gram of protein per day, right? So if I weigh 130 pounds, that's at least 130 grams of protein each day. When I started tracking that, I was only consuming 80 to 90. And so I was like, wow, even as like a healthy female who's exercising and eating clean, I was not eating enough. And when I started to focus on ways that I could increase that protein, I started to notice how less hungry I was, how fewer cravings I was having. And like I said, I would get to 9 o'clock at night, I would be having my like superfood shake that happens to have 20 grams of protein in it. And it's like, if someone offers me a cocktail, I'm sitting there holding a superfood shake. Like, am I really
Right.
going to have, you know what I mean? Like, then you're like,
Yeah.
no, I'm no longer interested. You know what I mean? So I think that when you can focus on the things that you're adding in, it makes it so that eliminating the alcohol is not as big of an issue. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. And here's since you talked about tracking, that is, something that I am 100% in agreement with you on the protein and all of that. And it is mind blowing for women too. But also, when people are telling me that they're tracking in their alcohol, like if they are tracking and say they're at a 2000 calorie or whatever, and they're tracking in their alcohol, I'm like, oh my gosh, please stop saving room for your alcohol,
Yeah.
because they're tracking it in as fats or carbs or whatever. And I look at their goals and I'm like, okay, what is this? How do you have this many carbs with no fiber? Or, and then come to find out they're tracking in their alcohol. You are tracking in something that has zero nutritional value and eliminating good whole foods that could go into that. So that is literally empty. It's just empty, and so I always like to touch on that. I know there's a lot of, coaches and things out there that promote tracking alcohol, but here's the other problem, Jenny, is that most people don't know the proper amount to track in. One serving is, for me, one serving used to be a bottle of wine. I mean, let's be realistic. So when they're not tracking in the accurate amounts, and you're saving calories for alcohol, but it doesn't work the same. It's not in out calories, so we have to remember that. I always say, like, for my clients, if you're going to have a treat on a Saturday, please eat your food. And if you're going to have that one glass of wine or whatever, intentionally have that one glass of alcohol. Please don't please don't not eat because of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think I'm expressing that correctly. I'm very passionate about that too. Please eat food, good food.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly what you said, right? Like, I know for me, most women that I work with one-on-one are in a situation where when I look at their food diary, I'm like, girlfriend, you are nowhere close to eating enough. And so why would you use, like, if you're only consuming 1,000 calories a day or 1,100 calories a day, and you're factoring in alcohol, which is not fueling you whatsoever, like, you're, not only are you under eating, but you're underserving your body. Like, it's just, it's what's happening. And again, I'm not here to say that, maybe there are people listening who are like, this is enough for me to make the total jump. Like, I want to become sober for the health of it, and this is the jump I need. There might be other people that are in the position of, how can I lessen this? Like, how can I make this less of a habit, and how can I make better choices? Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. And I honestly, a lot of times the all or nothing straight away doesn't work for people. I mean, I didn't just one day say, oh, I'm never going to drink again. I slowly said, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to drink on the weekends, or I'm not going to drink during the week. And I mean, for me, that wasn't working because it continued to creep back in. There was always a reason. Oh, well, it's Tuesday, or, oh, it's sunny, or whatever, so for me, it didn't work. I decided that I needed to do that. But for a lot of people, we can say, okay, maybe if you're drinking Friday and Saturday, let's do it on Saturday, if that's what you want, or let's commit to the one glass. I also like to recommend that you do have, like, I like to get a glass that maybe has a rim around the glass, or you can mark it so actually what one serving is. So then you can see if you're actually, consuming one serving or two, or whatever. Just some of those tips can help you, reduce it by, about 10% if you can per week. And slowly you realize and really start dialing in on those energy cues, those mindset cues, those clarity cues of, if you're drinking every day, alcohol is never getting out of your system. That's just the facts. So really trying to reduce that, and set those ground rules. And then if that's not happening, if you're not keeping those promises to yourself, that's when we need to have another conversation about your relationship with alcohol.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I like to tell, I think I told you this when we met previously, but I have some women in my course who, like I said, they were asking questions very early on when they would come into the course, and they would ask questions like, okay, so how does alcohol fit into this plan? Right? Because I provide meal plans, and I told them, I was like, I'm not here to be the food police or the alcohol
Right.
police, but these are my suggestions. My suggestion is you've committed to this program for 12 weeks to really get a feel for what your body can do and to really elevate your energy, right? It goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. It's 3 weeks or it's 6 weeks or it's 12 weeks, whatever it is. Like if there's something in your mind that says, I can't go that long without it, then re-listen to this podcast until it makes sense for you to eliminate it. But at the same time, like there are some healthier alternatives that I see a lot of women follow first. And this is what I've started to advocate for the women who ask me right off the bat, for the woman who is having that nightly 5 o'clock glass of wine, right? Who is saying, I don't know how to go from this to zero. And I like to say there's a company called Dry Farm Wines. There's also a brand called Fit Vine Wine. They are full alcohol wines, but they have no sugars added. So it's a little bit better on your blood sugar from that perspective, from a hormonal perspective, to if you are a wine drinker, right, to make that switch to a dry farm wine, to make a switch to something that doesn't have all those added sugars so that perhaps you don't get as much of a fluctuation in your sleep or beyond. And also just small things too, like starting out with making sure that those, like you said, cutting back to just maybe a drink or two on the weekend as opposed to during the week, starting like that until you're finally able to make the shift completely and eliminate it entirely, or for special occasions or whatever the case is. So I also like to say, I just listened to a podcast recently that was all about the ramifications of alcohol in the body. And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, was this research done on men or women? Because it has even more of an effect on women and our hormones, right? But also the one thing that I say and that I heard on this podcast was, if you're going to consume the alcohol, consume it earlier in the evening. The later into the evening that you have it, the more it affects your overall sleep. So if you're going to have it, right, especially as you're starting this process of eliminating, make sure you're having it earlier in the evening. So, okay, that leaves one more topic for us today, and that is the subject of perimenopause. And we've touched on it. You briefly touched on it, but I want to make sure that we dive into it. I see this happen, like I said, for myself, 35 was when I started to see this difference. Like, oh, all of a sudden I can't have sugar or alcohol quite the same way that I did before. And a lot of women tell me age of 40, like they turn 40 and all of a sudden a light switch comes on and then things change and they feel different. So I'll talk about sort of like the biomechanics behind this in a minute, but I want to just hear from you. Do you hear the same thing from your clients? Like age 35, 40, all of a sudden alcohol affects them differently. What is your experience with perimenopause?
Oh, 100%. And I just turned 40 in July. So, I mean, I know how it's all affecting, but it didn't just start. 35 for me. I was also pregnant at 35. So, that played a big role. But honestly, I do think after any women, and I mean, I've had women that are 32, 30, even after pregnancy have said that, alcohol affects them differently, sugar, all of that stuff. I think, can really be game changers. But yes, my clients 35 older, my women that are 50 and older, oh my goodness, their whole, the body changes so much. You start to hold on to that stored fat a little bit more. You've really got to pay attention to those cues. And this is a huge topic in some of our groups, and women are starting to realize that they want to feel a certain way, that optimal health as we get older. We talk a lot about that in our groups. And like you said, what is not serving us, and they're realizing, or maybe after they go on a vacation, it's taking them 2 weeks to feel more like themselves. Whereas heck, when we were 20, we could go and come back and, it's just not the same anymore. And that's okay. And I love what you said about fitting it like a size and fitting into those 20 something jeans, like releasing that burden from our body, from ourselves, but knowing that there are things we can do to move the needle forward. And less alcohol is one of those things, especially in that perimenopause, pausal kind of phase that lasts 15 years sometimes for people before. So, it's a journey. That's a journey in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, oh gosh, maybe this is me because I'm 35, 37, 40, 42, whatever the case is.
Mhm.
Like, I would say anywhere from 35 to 45, I start to hear women say things like, the exercise I was doing before isn't working anymore. Or all of a sudden now I feel like alcohol is affecting me, or I'm more of a lightweight, right? Like after 1 or 2 drinks, I start to feel the buzz. And so those are the types of things that indicate that perimenopause is most likely upon you, because
Mhm.
as we've talked about on this podcast before, after the age of 35 for most women, progesterone starts to take a dive. It starts to take a dive before your estrogen does. Estrogen takes a dive at menopause, but perimenopause is sort of the 8 to 10 year period before menopause. And so the progesterone's slowly declining, which also means fertility is slowly declining. And as a result of that, progesterone is sort of your anti-anxiety hormone. It is what keeps you calm. It's what helps you get that restorative sleep. It has a lot of roles besides just protecting a potential fetus, right? Like, there are other roles of that progesterone in your body. So as it starts to decline, we also see what starts to happen is your ovaries are saying, okay, see you later. Like, we're done. We're closing
Mhm.
up shop in this is our 10-year warning, right? Like, we're closing up shop in 10 years. And so as they start to wave farewell,
Yeah.
your adrenal glands, which are these teeny little glands that sit above your kidneys, start to say, okay, then we'll help, we'll take over.
Mhm.
And so they start to produce the hormones that your ovaries are starting to back out of, right? And so when that happens, if you think about it, your adrenal glands are already in charge of your stress hormone, cortisol. And so those little tiny adrenals on top of your kidneys are already, for the last 35, 40 years, working to keep you alive, right? They're your survival hormone. And so now all of a sudden they've taken on an extra role of helping produce your sex hormones. And so now they are extra taxed. So what I see women who say, like I said, alcohol is affecting me differently, or the exercise I used to do in my 20s isn't working anymore. It's because you are working against your female physiology. You are now working harder, and you're putting things like alcohol into your body that are making your body work harder when it's
Mhm.
already in a state of stress. It's already in this transitional phase. So I don't want to go into more detail there, but I think we've covered enough of the idea that it affects you regardless of your age. As you get older and enter perimenopause, you might start to see those effects. You may not have
Mhm.
seen them before, right? Or you may not have been as aware of
Recognized.
them
Right.
before. Right. Right. So, okay, perfect. Well, I'm so grateful for your time today. I think this is really going to help so many women to sort of make that light switch come
Yeah.
on of like, oh God, oh goodness, like these things that I'm feeling and experiencing really are real. Maybe this is something I should take into effect. If you're someone who is exercising and you're embracing clean eating and you're listening to this podcast because you want to learn about hormone health, but you can't let go of that glass of wine, I'm telling you that it could absolutely be the ultimate difference maker. There are doctors out there like Dr. Sarah Gottfried. Her book,
Mm.
Women, Health, and Hormones, is all about, she is a huge advocate of eliminating alcohol entirely, especially as you age as a female. So I'll link
Mhm.
that up in the show notes too. So I want to make sure that people know where to find you, Stacy. So if you could
Okay.
tell us where they can find you, that'd be super.
So you can find me on Instagram at stacy.t.miller. I am always giving tips and tricks for replacing alcohol, for, just all over healthier living, like Jenny promotes, and also stacytmiller.com. You can, I do replacing alcohol, kind of intentional wellness, one-on-one coaching with that too. That's really great. And, I am a mom and just someone that wants you to know that you can live a, amazing life without the burdens that alcohol places on you. So you can connect with me on those two. If you're feeling, that pull and need that a little bit of support, send me a message, DM me.
Awesome.
For sure.
Perfect. Okay. Well, we'll link all that up in the show notes, as well as everything we talked about today, from brands to books to everything else. So thank you, Stacy, so much for your time. I'm glad we've connected. Have
Thank
a
you,
great
Jenny,
day.
for having me.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Bye.